The lecture, left and right. We begin with a blank board, a piece of string, and I draw a line. On that line, I ask the audience to map the political debate, the lay of the land. Invariably, they'll say left and right. So we get some associated terms with these from the audience. Communism, socialism, this side fascism, white supremacy. And then we compare tactics, goals, stated goals and practical goals, culture, governance, and outcomes. Now, somewhere along the way, audience members began to say, these are the same. What's the difference? At this point, I stress the importance of this model, how it absolutely dominates policymaking in Europe, how it is predominant on college campuses, how our media perpetuate this, and I stress that this is the model that rules the world. Then I say, it's wrong. We'll come to the middle and we'll say, everyone knows good governance is in the center. Halfway between the metaphysical evil of communism, we delineate that, and the metaphysical evil of fascism. So here's this middle ground, this balance, and this is where everyone wants to be. Well, at this point I describe how communism took over in Russia, fascism took over in Europe, but the middle was never a stable status quo like ours. It was, in fact, the aftermath of World War I, a chaotic period. Or as I say, it's West hell and East hell and just plain hell. I take the string. First we erase all this. I make the note, though, left and right, because we refer back to it. And ask the question, if Soviet socialism, Chinese socialism, National Socialism, Democratic Socialism, if they're all the same, then what is the opposite? Is there a real opposite, and how do we describe it? Well, in the audiences I speak to, that's a bit of a stumper. So at this point, I explain to them that in 2334 BC, Sargon conquered Mesopotamia, established the first recorded state under one-man rule, and that since that time, humankind has understood politics as running a spectrum from liberty to tyranny. I give them a diversion. I explained that the original left-right terms come from the French Revolution, 1789. Those on the right side of the aisle supported the king and church, the status quo and authority. Those on the left supported, well, anything else. And that this phraseology, left and right, was applied and reapplied throughout the 1800s, different times, different places, kind of went out of use. And asked the audience where that came from. Its modern use began with Mussolini, who said that fascism is the right wing of the international communist movement. And Mussolini created the fascist movement. He was emphatic that fascism was part of communism. Hitler told Goebbels, National Socialism, fascism is communism. So it doesn't sound like there's a real conflict there. Using Mussolini's terminology, which was poetic and that intentionally. His son was a pilot and Mussolini loved airplanes. Aviation was still new. We used the model of an airplane. He saw Italian fascism as the right wing of the ship of communism. And on the liberty to tyranny spectrum, our metaphorical airplane is way out here, well past liberty and close to tyranny. Because for Hitler and Mussolini, this model, which they understood, they saw in strategic terms, personal strategic terms. They saw opportunity. They preached that they would take the modern world, Italy and Germany, from the inefficient chaos, what Mussolini called the rotting corpse, of liberty, to the organized, efficient, glorious tyranny of dictatorship. Make the trains run on time. So, there's not a conflict here. And where do we get this? What is this left-right model, and where did it come from? In a bright audience, someone might say the name. Hitler. In order to galvanize his street gangs early on, and then later, in order to galvanize the German nation against Russia, he posited a notion that fascism is the opposite of communism, the mortal enemy of communism. A lot of people at that time didn't like communism. He was famous for saying, if you tell a big enough lie, people will believe it. And the big enough lie was that left is the opposite of right, and you must choose. You are one or the other. Liberals, after the war and to date, make that moral choice. They claim the higher moral ground. They claim the moral high ground. So I ask the audience, is that your political model? Because if it is, you're in a trap, a false choice, a false dichotomy devised to enslave and destroy a people. This idea is a relic, undead, Nazi war machine weapon of propaganda, run amok and still on the rampage. That's the lecture. After the lecture, or after that main point, I tell the audience that conservatives, liberty to tyranny, that conservatives and liberals in the United States are all liberals. None of us want death camps. None of us want a king. None of us want a new religion. We are classical liberals and what they will identify as progressive or modern liberals. I say that we're all here, that the 18th century philosophers formulated this concept of liberty, and it was instituted with our Constitution. The end of the lecture is an appeal to liberals to stay here with us, where we're all together with the same goals. Now, I spend a couple of minutes explaining that the conservatives see this as a slippery slope, and that the progressive liberals aren't quite as convinced that it's that slippery or that steep a slope. I give some examples of the different way people see things, National Health Care Act, and how conservatives see that as the mandated Volkswagen, which no one ever got. I wrap up the lecture with this appeal that they stay here and send them out telling them to be kind. Left and right.